The phantom signal that once tormented the frozen aircraft graveyard of Anchorage had fallen silent, its echo swallowed by the ruthless winter wind. For Henry Walker, a retired Air Force mechanic seeking redemption among the rusting giants, the mystery seemed buried beneath the Alaskan snow. But for Max, his aging German Shepherd partner, a decorated K9 who trusted his nose more than ghosts, the real story was just beginning. During a routine patrol through rows of grounded C-17 Globemasters, Max abruptly halted, his muscles tensed like forged steel. His gaze locked onto a plane that should have been nothing more than another forgotten relic. Ignoring Henry's weary commands, Max lunged toward a crudely welded hatch, barking with the urgency of a soldier who knows danger is breathing on the other side. Henry could dismiss the ringing in his ears as another cruel reminder of the tragedy that stole his peace 6 years ago, but he could not dismiss Max's instincts. What secret was hidden so desperately inside that unrecorded aircraft? What truth did someone try to bury under layers of steel and snow? And why? Was Max the only one who could smell it? The answer would change everything. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. Winter smothered Anchorage beneath a white silence, the kind that swallowed sound and memory in one frozen breath. The aircraft Boneyard stretched outward like a metallic cemetery, wings jutting from snowbanks like tombstones of grounded giants. Henry Walker moved through that stillness with the weary precision of a man who understood both machines and ghosts. At 58 years old, he was tall and once broad-shouldered, though time and guilt had carved away the softness, leaving him lean and angular. His skin, weathered by decades of service, carried deep lines etched from sleepless nights. A thick salt and pepper beard covered his square jaw, not out of style but necessity. Some days he was simply too tired to shave. His short hair, once dark, now bore the white of frost nature's metals for survival. His blue eyes were startlingly clear, but shadowed by a heaviness only he understood, the burden of a memory he couldn't outrun. Henry's clothes reflected function, not pride. A heavy olive parka streaked with old oil stains, worn denim jeans stiff from the cold, and steel-toe boots that had long since lost their shine. A laminated badge hung from his chest, Site Operations Manager, but it felt more like a label of confinement than authority. He belonged to this graveyard now, just like the airplanes he tended. At his side trotted his only constant, Max, a 10-year-old German Shepherd built like a soldier. Max's coat was a striking blend of dark brown and charcoal gray, thick and plush against the brutal Alaskan wind. A faded scar sliced above his left eye, proof of his years as a military K9 assigned to explosive detection. Though age stiffened his hind legs and slowed his leaps, his senses remained razor-sharp and his loyalty absolute. Where Henry's heart faltered, Max's devotion filled the cracks. The dog was attentive, disciplined, protective, a guardian forged in the same fire as the man he followed. Henry often spoke more to Max than to any human. In truth, Max understood him more than most people ever had. Their nightly patrol wound through the silent corpses of aircraft C-17 Globemasters looming like slumbering beasts, F-22 fuselages stripped bare and silvered by frost. Helicopters folded into themselves like dead birds. Each metal carcass told a story of flight and fall. Henry walked these rows with the solemnity of a priest tending graves. But tonight, the silence felt different. It pressed deeper, pushed harder. Then, beep! A thin electronic chirp sliced the cold. Too precise to be nature. Too faint to be harmless. Henry stopped. Max's ears shot up, pivoting sharply like radar dishes locking on a target. Beep, beep! There it was again. Random, irregular. A dying machine's gasp for help. Henry swallowed hard, throat tightening as the cold air burned his lungs. His heartbeat sped not from exertion, but memory. 6 years ago, a cockpit recorder alarms screaming metal tearing apart, and his signature his on the maintenance report. 8 souls lost, and he was the man who should have saved them. He forced the memory down. He needed logic now, not ghosts. "That's not real," he muttered to himself, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Max didn't agree. The dog surged forward, tail-rigid nostrils flaring. His disciplined body language shifted into alert mode. Head-low muscles braced, shoulders squared. The trained response of a warrior recognizing danger. Henry followed Boots, crunching in the icy gravel, as they moved toward a shadowed C-17 at the far edge of the yard. This aircraft was different, one of the heavily stripped units designated for deep salvage. No power, no beacon, nothing that should beep. But the sound persisted. Max arrived first, stopping with violent precision. He pressed his nose against a large steel panel on the aircraft's hull, a rectangular maintenance hatch. The metal bore scars of a crude weld, thick, uneven, done in haste. Not regulation, not military standard. Certainly not listed in any report Henry had ever signed. Max began to bark sharp, forceful commands from a trained responder. His claws scraped against the panel with urgent desperation, each strike ringing like a warning siren. Max Henry's snapped voice stern, "Heel enough." But Max didn't stop. He barked again, 2 short, 1 long, the pattern he had used in service whenever he detected hazardous chemicals. Subtle smells humans couldn't recognize, but his nose could. Henry's breath clouded in front of him as his pulse hammered harder. His hands that once steadied aircraft engines in mid-flight emergencies, shook now. He placed a palm against the metal. It was colder than the rest of the plane. Too cold, as if something inside drew the warmth away. The beeping grew louder. Not rhythmic, not SOS, just wrong. Henry leaned closer, ear to the panel, and for a terrifying moment, just one, he thought he heard voices behind the metal. A whisper, a plea. The death rattle of a memory he had tried to bury. He jerked back, blinking hard, grounding himself in the present. "Get a grip," he hissed to his own spiraling mind. But Max wasn't hallucinating. Max had smelled truth. "What the hell did they weld shut?" Henry whispered. His heart felt like an engine misfiring, sputtering fear, adrenaline flooding the system. A part of him wanted to walk away, to pretend the sound was just another old machine, dying in peace. The world had enough ghosts. Yet Max stepped closer, pressing his head against Henry's leg as if urging, "You need to see this." Henry exhaled slowly, frost drifting from his lips like smoke escaping a cracked engine. He knelt, bringing his battered face inches from the panel, studying every sloppy seam. Whoever sealed this hatch did it in a hurry, and did not want anyone opening it again. His mind, trained by decades of aircraft maintenance, assembled signs into a silent revelation: unauthorized repair, hidden cargo, chemical trace, phantom signal. This was no random malfunction. Someone somewhere had something to hide. Max barked again, one decisive bark that echoed through the rows of steel carcasses like a gunshot. Henry's spine prickled. The cold suddenly felt like teeth. "All right," he murmured, giving Max a slow, grim nod. "I see it too." The decision settled into his bones like a lock clicking shut. He would return tomorrow with tools. He would cut this panel open, and whatever secret was entombed inside this forgotten aircraft, he would drag it into the light. Henry placed a steadying hand on Max's back. The dog's body vibrated with restrained urgency, alert, ready, fearless. "For tonight," Henry said quietly, "we go home." They turned away from the C-17, but neither looked calm. Henry's thoughts tangled into a web of fear and anticipation. Max kept glancing back, ears high, wanting to stay, to fight, to finish the mission now. The phantom beeps faded behind them, swallowed by wind. But the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like a warning. Henry Walker had tried to bury his past beneath snow and wreckage, Tomorrow the past would rise again. Max would make sure of it. Henry Walker returned to the trailer that night with Max at his heels, but the comfort of familiar walls did nothing to quiet the turbulence in his mind. He set his heavy gloves on the workbench, wiped frost from his beard, and tried to steady his breathing. Max paced near the small metal door, occasionally pausing to whine softly, a signal of confusion, even frustration. Henry couldn't blame him. In the Boneyard, Max's instincts had been absolute, the kind of reaction the dog only showed when something hidden and dangerous called for attention. Henry poured fresh water into Max's bowl and watched the dog's reflection shimmer in the rippling surface. Max was a fighter and a survivor, but tonight even he seemed uncertain about the path ahead. Henry's own reflection stared back from the dark trailer window, blue eyes strained and narrowed by the weight of buried truth. 6 years had passed since the disaster, the crash of Flight 417. 8 lives lost, and his name stamped in black on every official report. The forward spar attachment failed during ascent. The wing sheared off. There had been no way to save them. At least that was what the experts told him. The leak of guilt had been slow but constant, eroding him until he fled here, the quiet outskirts of Anchorage, choosing to protect the remains of aircraft rather than face the ghosts of the one that fell. But today, Max had shown him something. Something not recorded. Something sealed just like his own grief. Henry tried to sleep, but flashes of memory ripped through the darkness, a younger Henry standing in the hangar clipboard, in hand a pilot's firm handshake. Thanks for the thorough work, Walker, and the roar of engines fading into a sky he now feared. He opened his eyes in a cold sweat. Max sat at his bedside, staring directly at him, ears alert, as if guarding him from the dream he couldn't escape. Henry placed a trembling hand on the dog's strong neck and whispered, "Tomorrow. We'll go back tomorrow." Dawn came dressed in bleak gray. Snow drifted in lazy spirals over the Boneyard, each flake a reminder of the cold silence hiding beneath steel hulls. Henry brewed a bitter pot of coffee and dressed in layers. Max watched every movement, tail low, but wagging just once approval. They trudged across the frost-coated ground, passing the nose of a retired Boeing 707, where an older mechanic named Tom Jenkins was jotting notes on a clipboard. Tom was in his late 60s, a barrel-chested man with a patchy gray beard and thick glasses that always slipped to the tip of his nose. He'd survived a helicopter crash in '94 while serving as a flight engineer, which left him with a slight limp and a distrust of silence. "Morning, Walker." Tom called out, "You look like you saw a ghost out here." His tone was friendly enough, but sharp eyes scanned Henry's tense shoulders and restless dog. Henry forced a neutral nod. "Couldn't sleep. Too damn cold." Tom grinned, though it didn't touch his eyes. "If you ever want someone to check on things with you, I've got tools and arthritis to spare." Henry appreciated the offer, but the sealed hatch was something he needed to face alone, at least for now. "Thanks, Tom. Just another day, right?" Tom raised a brow but didn't push further. Max growled low under his breath. Not at Tom, just restless. The C-17 waited for them in the farthest sector, half buried in wind-packed snow, like a beached steel whale. Henry's breath caught when he spotted it. The welded panel was still there, rough seams glaring like scars across the aircraft's flank. Max moved in first, nose close to the ground, following invisible trails of scent only he could interpret. Again, his posture shifted, muscles tightening, legs braced, tail straight as a steel rod. Henry pulled out a flashlight and ran the beam over the weld. If this were a sanctioned modification, it would be smooth, precise, and documented. But this patch, Someone had used the wrong gauge, steel wrong angle, wrong everything. Someone didn't want this opened, Henry whispered. Max barked once agreement. Henry reached into his jacket and removed a small notebook where every tail number in the yard was listed. His pencil scratched over paper. But the C-17's tail number AF72991 was nowhere. He checked again and again. No record in Anchorage. No record in the main database. A ghost plane in a place meant for the dead. "Who brought you here?" Henry murmured. Max sat near his boots, watching every motion like a second conscience. Henry reached up and tapped the panel lightly with his knuckles. The hollow echo came back strained and uneven, something behind it, of absorbed sound. Not empty. Not sealed by accident. He shut his eyes briefly, and the past slammed into him like a fuselage hitting earth. The crash transcript, the alarms, the ripping metal, the screaming pilot. His fault. His signature. His shame. Henry staggered back, breath shattered. Max rushed forward, bumping his leg with insistent nudges, not allowing the dark tide to swallow him. Henry knelt and buried his gloved hand in Max's thick fur. "I know, boy," he breathed. "I just can't fail another one." The wind picked up hissing warnings across the broken plains. Henry pulled out his phone and snapped pictures of the weld from multiple angles. He needed documentation, needed proof. He recorded a video narrating details, unauthorized sealing chemical scent response from a trained K-9 absence of record on manifest. He would find out who had done this, and why. But to move forward, he needed access to the deeper archives, Air Force records no longer available to him. There was only one person he trusted who still had that kind of clearance, Sarah Jensen. Sarah was a logistics compliance officer he'd worked with during his service, a woman in her late 40s with striking auburn hair often tied in a neat ponytail. She was tall and slender, but carried herself with the strength of someone who had spent years fighting for accuracy in paperwork no one appreciated. Her face bore a stubborn determination in every line, and her eyes, sharp hazel, could slice through lies with a single glance. She lost her husband, a pilot, during a training mission years ago due to faulty maintenance standards. Since then, she had devoted her career to ensuring truth was never buried under stamped approvals and rushed signatures. She was the closest thing Henry had to a friend in that world, and the voice that once whispered, "You're not the one to blame." Henry hesitated, thumb hovering over her name on his contact list. If he reached out, everything changed. The silence thickened, waiting. Max nudged his hand again, as if commanding, "Do it." Henry tapped call. The phone rang once, twice. Then Sarah answered, her voice firm but surprised. "Henry, it's been years. Are you all right?" His throat tightened. "No," he said honestly. "I think I found something. Something I wasn't supposed to find." The wind howled around him like a warning. Snow stung his face like tiny shards of truth. "And Sarah," he added, "I think it's happening again." Max barked sharply at the welded panel, one final chilling reminder. The past wasn't done with them. Not yet. The night Henry chose to break the seal was the kind of night the wind howled like a living thing. Snow spiraled in sharp, glittering shards under the floodlights of the Anchorage aircraft Boneyard, turning every shadow into a warning. Henry Walker stood beside the ghost C-17, his breath rising in pale plumes, his gloved hands gripping the equipment he had spent years using to dismantle aircraft, not violate them. Max, his aging German shepherd companion, sat close by. Eyes narrowed and tail low, the tension in his body unmistakable. He knew this was not routine maintenance. The sealed hatch loomed over them, as if the plane itself resisted the act. Henry swallowed, staring at the uneven welds once more. Whoever did this wasn't sloppy by accident. They were sloppy because they were rushing. They were hiding something. The thought alone chilled Henry deeper than the wind cutting through his parka. He strapped on his protective helmet and ignited the plasma cutter. A shrill electric hiss split the silent sparks spraying out in a brilliant arc of light. Max stepped back, but his gaze stayed locked on the spreading line of molten metal. Henry's hands, steady despite the adrenaline pounding through his bloodstream, guided the tool with slow precision. This wasn't just an engineer opening a panel. This was a man performing surgery on the past. As steel surrendered under the torch's heat, Henry's heartbeat synced with each ragged grind of metal giving way. Sweat beaded beneath his helmet despite the freezing air. At last, a long screech rang out as the final section dislodged. The steel hatch clanged inward, bouncing once against something inside before falling still. Then silence. Not empty silence, watching silence. Henry flipped up his helmet and lifted his flashlight. The beam sliced into the darkness. Beneath the harsh white glare appeared row after row of military cargo crates, olive drab and immaculate in their arrangement. They filled the entire cabin. Not equipment scraps, not mothballed relics. This was a warehouse, hidden, sealed, buried in plain sight. Max stepped forward, hackles raised, issuing a low rumble from deep in his chest. Henry felt his breath catch. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though there was nothing easy about the fear tightening his ribs. He grabbed the edge of the opening and pulled himself inside. His boots clanged against the metallic floor, and Max leapt after him, with far more grace despite his age. Darkness closed around them like a secret grateful to finally be acknowledged. Henry approached the nearest crate. Heavy metal clasps held it closed, but his pry bar made quick work of them. The lid came up with a dull crack, and Henry angled his flashlight inside. Nestled in foam lay what looked like standard hydraulic actuators, critical replacements for landing gear and wing systems. They gleamed with newness, smooth alloy still untouched by dust. But something about them felt off. He lifted one, too light by a hair. The balance was wrong in his palm. And the data plate, though expertly etched, had a font Henry didn't recognize. It was the kind of counterfeit only a trained specialist or a man haunted by a technical flaw would detect. He cursed under his breath. He reached into the lid and pulled out the paperwork. Certificates. Inspection stamps. All perfectly forged. All bearing the seal of Black Ridge Defense, a defense contractor whose reputation was built on pristine compliance. Henry's jaw tightened so hard it ached. "You bastards," he muttered. Before his anger could burn further, Max moved. Suddenly rigid ears stabbing forward, nose aimed at a crate deeper within the aircraft. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He simply dropped into a perfect alert posture, the one Henry had seen countless times during their service. It meant dangerous anomalies, often the kind humans couldn't detect. Henry approached the crate Max indicated. His flashlight beam shook slightly, now his body reacting before his mind caught up. The stenciling on this crate differed. ADS FSA 744R FSA, forward spar attachment, the same critical part that had failed in the crash that destroyed Henry's life. His heart thudded painfully, a drumbeat in his ears. He tore the clasps open this time with desperate force. The lid came free. There they were. 5 fittings designed to keep a wing attached to its fuselage. 5 parts identical in design to the one that ripped apart mid-air 6 years ago. 5 lies forged in metal. Henry stared, light, trembling over the components, and reached for the manifest tucked within the foam. Serial numbers lined the page like gravestones. His eyes tracked down the list, breath frozen in his chest. Serial number 2019, B78841. The exact number tied to the failure. The exact number printed on every report condemning him. His knees buckled. The flashlight clattered from his hand. He caught himself on the crate's edge as a strangled sound escaped his throat. For a split second, the cold wasn't from winter, but from the brutal realization that everything, his shame, his exile, the nightmares that haunted him, wasn't his to bear. He hadn't killed anyone. Someone else had, and made him the scapegoat. Henry sucked in a shaking breath, chest heaving. The cabin pressed in heavy with the truth. The past didn't just resurface, it attacked. Max nudged his knee, a grounding presence. The dog's brown eyes held quiet understanding. Max had carried Henry's guilt with him for years. Tonight, that weight finally changed shape. Henry ran a hand over his face, beard rough beneath trembling fingers. Rage simmered beneath the shock, the kind that forged resolve in the fires of injustice. "They let them die," he whispered. "They let them die so they could profit." Max growled at the crates as if agreeing that these pieces of metal were accessories to murder. Henry rose slowly, picking up his flashlight again and shining it across the bay. Every crate here was part of a silent conspiracy, one that had slipped past inspections, one that delivered death inside perfect packaging. His phone vibrated in his pocket, startling him. He fumbled it free, an incoming message from Sarah Jensen. "Got your voicemail. This sounds serious. Taking leave. On a flight tonight." Henry stared at the screen, heart beating with a new rhythm, not fear this time, purpose. He snapped photos of the fittings manifests, crate labels, hands steady, now controlled by a fire that no snowstorm could extinguish. This was proof. This was salvation. This was war. Max's ears flicked toward the open hatch, alert again. The wind had shifted. Snow sifted into the cabin, carrying with it a sense of urgency. Henry pocketed his phone. Enough discovery for tonight. Exposure risk grew with every second. He leaned close to Max, fingers gripping the dog's collar. "We're done here for now." Henry climbed down and secured the opening as best he could to delay attention. Tomorrow, Sarah would arrive, and together they would drag every truth buried in this steel tomb into the unforgiving daylight. Max trotted at his side, tail low but purposeful. Their shadows stretched across snow like two warriors marching from the depths of history. The wind whispered behind them as they walked away, not a warning anymore, a promise. The past didn't just want justice. It demanded it. Snow hammered Anchorage all night, a relentless storm that erased footprints and blurred the horizon into a whirl of white and wind. By dawn, the world outside Henry Walker's trailer looked like a blank sheet of paper ready to record whatever history would be written today. Henry stood at his small desk, hunched over his laptop, like a soldier over a war table. His fingers moved with cold precision, uploading photos and videos of the counterfeit crates to multiple encrypted drives. The screen's cold light glinted against the deep creases in his face, carving sharp edges into a man already shaped by harsh truths. Max rested nearby, his great head on his paws, but his amber eyes never left Henry's form, not even for a blink. The German shepherd's aging muscles were still coiled with duty. Even in stillness, he remained a sentry. Henry set up his insurance, the digital dead man's switch. Every 24 hours, he would need to enter a coded check-in. If he didn't, the evidence would spread across the world like wildfire. He sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies and all the years lost to guilt that had not belonged to him in the first place. A knock cut sharply through the trailer's fragile silence. Max's ears shot up and his muscles tensed instantly. Henry stood slowly, Unexpected visitors in Anchorage were never good news. He cracked the door. Wind and snow swirled in, and behind them stood Sarah Jensen. She was taller than he remembered, maybe because she now carried herself with a conviction sharpened over years of fighting bureaucratic negligence. Sarah was slender, but strength showed in the way she planted her boots into the snow, as if daring the storm to move her. Her auburn hair, gathered into a tight ponytail, had escaped a few rebellious strands that framed her defined cheekbones. Her skin was pale from years under harsh office lights, yet her hazel eyes remained fierce, two bright signals cutting through the cold. She was dressed for the battle. She believed she was walking into a charcoal long coat lined with fur-black gloves, gripping a leather satchel that likely carried more classified documents than clothes. "Henry," she said, voice low but steady, "we're out of time." He stepped aside and Max greeted her with a slow, respectful sniff. She knelt, ruffling his fur with gentle familiarity. "You still watching over him, old boy?" she murmured. Max responded with a soft chuff, as if confirming always. Inside, Sarah placed her satchel on the desk. "Your message was vague, but alarming enough," she said. "What the hell did you uncover out there?" Henry didn't speak. He let the evidence speak for him. He opened the secure folder and slid over the photos of the forged fittings and manifests. Sarah's expression shifted from curiosity to shock to simmering anger. Her jaw clenched. She took a steadying breath. "I knew they cut corners, but this is murder by profit." Max growled at the word murder, picking up on the tension. Henry nodded. "They killed 8 people and blamed me." Sarah's hand hesitated above the screen. Her voice softened, but sharpened too. "You deserved the truth years ago." A silence heavier than snow settled between them. Then Henry's phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. "Meet us downtown, Hotel Anchorage Conference Suite. Noon. Come alone." Sarah read the message over his shoulder. Her response was instant. Not alone. Not ever alone. Max barked once agreement. By noon, Anchorage had thawed just enough to reveal streets lined with slush and exhaust. The towering glass of Hotel Anchorage loomed like a modern fortress against the storm. Henry walked through its polished doors with Max at his side, ignoring the uncomfortable looks from the lobby staff. Dogs weren't exactly standard guests here. But Max's military bearing discouraged any questions. They were led to a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-clad city. Inside, 2 people waited. The first was Harrison Cole, mid-50s, the kind of man whose authority didn't come from rank, but from the effortless confidence of someone who had never been told no. His black suit was immaculate, his tie straight, his salt and charcoal hair styled with surgical sharpness. His face bore the expensive sheen of good health and quiet corruption, with smooth skin that had likely never felt a day of real labor. Cold blue eyes watched Henry like a hawk, analyzes prey efficiently, without empathy. Beside him sat Laura Reyes, early 40s, sharp-featured with raven black hair pulled into a sleek bun. She had narrow brown eyes framed by dark brows and a mouth shaped into an unbending line of legal precision. Her charcoal suit clung with military neatness, a badge clipped at her hip, Chief Corporate Counsel. Cole offered a thin smile that didn't come close to warmth. "Mr. Walker, your concerns reached us faster than expected." Max positioned himself slightly ahead of Henry, head low, ready to defend. Henry sat Sarah beside him, her presence a quiet declaration that he was not alone in this room. Laura folded her hands. "We are here to discuss a misunderstanding before it becomes unnecessarily public." Henry's laugh was humorless. "Misunderstanding, which part?" "The sealed plane, the counterfeit parts, the dead crew." Cole's eyes hardened. "Be careful, Walker. Accusations like those can bury a man." Henry leaned forward. Already been buried. 6 years underground, in fact. I'm done being your scapegoat. Laura's voice was smooth but icy. We can compensate you generously for your trouble and your silence. Max growled. Henry did not. He simply said, I don't want your money. Cole's smile dissolved. Then what do you want? Henry stood. The words came not from fear, but from conviction welded stronger than any steel panel. You'll fund an aviation technical academy right there at the Boneyard. Not a token project, a legacy, a full-scale institution built to prevent another disaster, built to teach honor where yours failed. Sarah watched him with steady pride, seeing the man beneath the guilt finally rising. Cole blinked, taken off script. That's unreasonable. Henry's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. And if I vanish tonight, everything I uncovered goes public tomorrow morning. Every file, every serial, every false inspection stamp. It's already in place. Even Laura couldn't hide her alarm. Cole's throat bobbed, rage flickering behind his eyes. He stared at Henry as if trying to measure the immovable force standing before him. Finally, against his own pride, he nodded once. A surrender disguised as negotiation. You'll have what you want. Henry gave a single nod. Max's ears flicked forward, sensing a shift. Sarah whispered, we did it. But Henry didn't smile. He understood the cost of fighting powerful enemies. This wasn't over. This was only the first victory, and the most dangerous moment was always the one right after. Max pressed close against Henry's leg as they left the room. Two veterans walking away from a battlefield no less deadly than the ones they had survived before. Snow resumed falling, as if the storm had been waiting for them to step into the open again. Anchorage's winter swallowed sound, but beneath the silence Henry could hear something new, the ticking of consequences. For the first time in 6 years, Henry Walker felt not guilt, but the weight of justice finally in motion. And justice once awakened has teeth. Sunlight glittered across the Anchorage boneyard like shards of glass scattered by the sky itself. The air still carried the bite of cold, but spring had begun to whisper its defiant snowmelt seeping beneath aircraft husks, pooling into thin reflective mirrors that captured the beginnings of a new future. 3 years had passed since Henry Walker demanded justice in a polished hotel room. 3 years since he stood across from men who killed for profit and won. Now, among the same metal giants that once witnessed his downfall, Henry walked with his head no longer bowed. The Walker and Max Aviation Academy rose in stark contrast to its surroundings, modern steel beams and glass panels gleaming beside the rusted bones of forgotten planes. The Academy's main hall bore a bold emblem, a German shepherd's silhouette, over crossed wrenches, a tribute to the unwavering loyalty that saved a man's honor. Inside the workshop classroom, 20 young students in navy blue coveralls gathered around metal tables, each table cluttered with aircraft components in various states of disassembly. The air smelled of engine oil, heated metal, and ambition. Henry stood at the front, larger than life, despite the silver that now dominated his hair. His beard had grown thicker, fully frost-white, lending him an aura of rugged wisdom. Deep lines still marked his face, but those lines no longer told a story of guilt. They told a story of survival. He wore the academy uniform, a dark plaid shirt beneath a heavy navy jacket, with a small patch over the heart. Instructor Walker. His boots were still scuffed and his hands still bore every scar of his career. But his posture was different now. He stood not like a man hiding from his past, but one who used it as a foundation. Beside him lay Max, now 13 years old. His once strong legs trembled slightly when he moved, and white fur spread generously across his muzzle. Yet his eyes, those intelligent amber eyes, burned with the same unwavering fierceness. A faded service vest covered his graying coat marked Retired K9. Students often paused just to place a gentle hand on his head before class began, like he was a guardian of both loyalty and truth. Henry tapped the metal table before him. Resting upon it were two identical aircraft parts forward spar attachment fittings, the very component that had once destroyed his life. He lifted one part with his strong left hand. This, he said, his voice a steady, deep rumble that quieted the room instantly, is the real thing. Perfect metal, lifetime certification, built to hold a wing and every soul inside that aircraft to the sky. Then he lifted the other, setting its weight against his palm. This one is almost the same, a few grams lighter. The serial font is just a hair too thin. But that difference, he raised his gaze to meet every pair of young eyes, is the weight of human lives. The room held its breath as students leaned closer. A tall student named Evan Brooks, 18, stood nearest the table. He was a lanky boy with sandy blonde hair and freckles scattered across his nose. Personality anxious, but earnest, a kid who always worried about failing, but cared too much to give anything less than his all. His voice quivered slightly. So, this is why you always say precision is a promise. Henry nodded once. Every bolt you tighten, every report you sign, they're promises, not to the company, not even to the plane. He placed his palm on his chest. But to the people whose lives depend on your hands doing the job right. He saw pride ignite in Evan's eyes, bright and young, the spark of a man soon to be trusted with the sky. Near the back stood Maya Torres, 19, short and strong, with dark curls pulled into a knot and wide, curious eyes. She was stubborn in spirit and refused to let anyone underestimate her. She asked, "Sir, did someone ever break that promise to you?" Henry drew a slow breath. The metal parts before him reflected a story he carried like a scar. "Yes," he answered simply. And that was enough. The students understood. They broke into workshop groups practicing inspections on old but genuine components. Henry walked among them, giving guidance with the focus of a soldier and the warmth of a mentor. Max followed slower now, but determined, occasionally nudging a student's boot, as if supervising their dedication. At one table, Liam Carter, 21, a broad-shouldered student with deep-set eyes and a shy temperament, struggled with calibrating a gauge. His dark hair constantly fell over his brow, forcing him to swipe it aside with irritation. Life had made him guarded his father's death in a machinery accident, left him wary of tools, yet desperate to master them, so no one else would share that fate. Henry placed a steady hand over Liam's trembling one. "Confidence isn't louder than fear," he murmured. "Confidence is choosing to show up anyway." Liam's grip steadied. For the first time, he believed he belonged here. Later, as evening crept over Anchorage, Henry and Max stepped outside into the cold. The academy windows glowed golden behind them, laughter and determined chatter spilling from within like warmth made visible. They climbed a small rise overlooking both the school and the endless remains of grounded aircraft. Max leaned against his leg, a familiar gesture worn over years of partnership. Henry absently scratched behind the dog's ear. The wind carried echoes of the past alarms, twisting metal blame like a noose. But those echoes had lost their power. The ghosts now stood in the light, named and defeated. A new promise had risen in their place. The students inside would take that promise and drive it into the future. Henry gazed at the C-17 where everything changed. Snow rested gently upon its wings, no longer a shroud of guilt, but a quiet reminder of what truth had overcome. Max let out a soft sigh and lowered his head onto Henry's boot. Henry felt his throat tighten with emotion, love, gratitude, and the kind of peace a man only earns when he fights for it. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "We finally did it." The horizon glowed with the first colors of sunset, purple fading into amber, winter releasing the sky, even if just for the evening. And for the first time in 6 long years, Henry Walker looked forward, not back. In the heart of a cold Alaskan airplane graveyard, 2 veterans, 1 man, 1 dog, had brought something miraculous back to life: honor. And honor once reborn never dies. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or wings in the clouds. They come quietly, in the form of a loyal dog who refuses to give up, in the courage of a weary soldier who stands again, in the moment when truth finally defeats fear. Henry and Max remind us that God's grace is often hidden in the darkest chapters of our lives, waiting for the moment we are strong enough to see it. When the world tells us to kneel, faith teaches us to rise. When guilt chains our hearts, forgiveness sets us free. So tonight, may you remember, no matter how heavy the past, no matter how cold the winter, God walks beside you, guiding every step toward your sunrise. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May He give you strength when your heart is tired. And may He send you a loyal companion just like Max when you feel alone. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from and what miracle you are praying for. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so together we can keep shining His light into every forgotten corner of this world. God bless you always.